Ever since I was a young and I was into rapping 20 years later and I'm still here yapping. Guess I got so much to say, so I'm trying to educate all of us. I hope together we can elevate. Time flies and our life is moving so fast. What's the forecast? Good vibes to be broadcast. So come and chill with me as we let the bad vibes blow past. This is Shout Out Podcast.
Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Shout Out Podcast. So it's officially now a year since we've started, and the last episode I thanked you guys, the audience, the subscribers, everyone. And I'd like to thank, this episode, I'd like to thank all the guests who had graciously accepted to come on the podcast and for making this possible. So thank you everyone. 1 year. Episode 23, and we have a special guest. He's a young dynamic entrepreneur, born in Nagaland, but raised and pretty much lived his whole adult life in Australia, and that's where he did his masters in entrepreneurship and innovation. After that, he got into several different careers. He was first working with in the conservation field for quite a long period, for about 8 years, and then he shifted to the higher education sector, and he both of these in Australia, and now he's back home, back in Nagaland, and striving to work for the people, our people, us, all of us. So he currently leads Naga Ed, which is a digital education company, which he co-founded with his partner Shiroi Shaiza. So welcome to the podcast, Kevisato.
Thank you so much for having me on board, and congratulations on 1 year. That's quite an achievement.
Yeah. It's just flown by. I don't know how 1 year has gone. So, thanks for taking the time out to be with us also.
More than happy.
You came down just for this from Kohima, despite your back problems also.
It's a bit warmer here than expected.
Yeah, definitely. So, we have a lot to talk about today. Let's begin with the shout-outs.
Yep.
So, I'll do my shout-out, and after that, you can look at the camera. And right? My shout-out for this episode goes out to TAFMA. As many of you may know, they are called TAFMA, which is Task Force for Music and Arts, and they are under the Directorate of Youth and Sports Resources. And TAFMA, they were created to promote music, promote the industry, and grow it. And I think they've been doing a great job. Personally, my company Infinity Inc. has been working closely in hand with them on several projects, and I'm pleased to say it's been a good experience. And recently just seen a poster which I also shared on social media. Many of you may have seen it. They are leading a contingent of 70 plus artists from Nagaland to Bangkok, Thailand, for this Northeast India Festival, which is going to be held on the 30th and 31st of this month. So shout out to all the artists that are going also, and shout out to TAFMA.
Okay, so for my shout out, I'm going to shout out to my dad. I was actually reflecting on my arrival here and just appreciating all the things that he's done to help set up a soft landing, because I've been away for about 27 years and I've just returned. So he also has a project called Healing Garden, which is in Medzipema. It's also his residence. But he really believed that us as Nagas needed spiritual and internal healing. And so he set up that project. So shout out to my dad, Vishir Sanya.
Yeah. That's a nice shout out. I mean, I enjoyed that small visit that day when I came up to the place, Healing Garden, right?
Yeah.
And the concept is also is very unique. None like it, I don't think, here in Nagaland. So
come back for a longer visit, and he'll take you on for a walk.
Definitely. We said. Anyway, there's another thing in plan also. So, yeah.
More to come.
Yes, more to come. Definitely. So, the first part of the show is always, I ask the guests about their backstory, their childhood, and all. Yours, I think, is going to be an interesting one, and especially for the audience who, like I mentioned in the introduction, 3 years. What age did you move?
Class 3.
Class 3, not 3 years. Sorry, but that is basically just
a baby.
A baby, and you've been there for the entire your entire life, and you've moved back just 3 months ago.
Yeah,
3 months ago. So this is going to make for an interesting story. Let us know about
freshly
how
landed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I was actually when you were saying that talk a bit about your backstory, I had to go and recall everything.
Right.
Because not very often you think about your high school and you're growing up. So I actually went to Facebook and I scrolled through all my old photos. I said, this happened, that happened. But yeah, as you were introduced, I was born here in Nagaland. So spent the first 8 years of my life here, up to class 8. Class 3, sorry. And I have very, very strong, vivid memories of growing up here.
Okay.
And those memories, I think, are very stark because of the difference. So when there's one world that you're living in that is completely different from another world, then those memories are very sharp. So the last place that we lived was around Sanyoro River in high school area. So in those days, I remember very fondly, I went to Bethel School, but we lived on the edge of a forest.
Okay.
So every day we used to go into the forest, sometimes waking up at 6 a.m. in the morning or earlier, and go and play in the forest before going to school. We used to swim in that river, and people are disgusted because the river is not as clean anymore. But yeah, I used to go around with my friends, Akele and Niprazele. One time we caught some squirrels and we took it to some neighbors, and I think we sold it for 10 rupees. And then we went to the sweet shop. I remember going to the village Konama, so my ancestral village.
Right.
Going to the fishery ponds, catching fish with my family. I have one very vivid memory of on the way to Konama. You can see Konama and you can see all of the paddy fields in the valleys. And one time we stopped there for a picnic. During our summer break. So that is also very vivid. So
the image.
Image. So all these images are very, very vivid and strong in my mind.
That's nice.
And a lot of them have carried with me in my journey to Australia. So we first went to Australia in 1996. And when we landed there, it was quite a different world. So like at the time that I left, I think I had seen or touched a computer twice. Right? We didn't own a TV. And to tell you the difference, like my little brother, Siezo, he was obsessed with flushing toilets. So everywhere we went, we would go to a friend's house. Even by the time we got to the airport, he'd first, I need to go to the bathroom. Then he'd go flush the toilet, and the water would disappear. Yeah. So another one when we landed was my mom saw an escalator for the first time. So one was going up and one was going down. And she wanted to go up and she saw that one was free, it was empty. So she tried to get onto it, but it was...
That's the one that's coming down.
So these are small tidbits to say, but the world was completely different.
I can imagine.
And what we imagined was kind of like a few things that we saw on TV. But when we got there, obviously, it was quite different. And... when we got there, we lived in a community center for IFC. And when we got there, we were only supposed to be there for a couple of years. So in my mind, I was going there. I was in class 3, class 4. My younger sister was in a class below me. And then my younger brother was in a class below that. We're all about a year and a half apart. And we were only supposed to be a couple of years. So the first few years there, I was just completely on holiday. Having the time of my life, right? In a new country, there was a lot of freedoms. The area that we moved into was so beautiful. Australia is still one of the most beautiful countries in the world. If you look at the landscapes, if you look at the parks, they put a lot of emphasis into nature. Camping, outdoors is a big part of their culture. And it shows in the physical infrastructure. So every locality, every suburb has a big park. You'd go play in that park. So those first few years, I was completely on holiday. Then after a couple of years, I would ask my mom and dad, after Azo, when are we going home? Right? Okay, I've had a few years. Now it's time to go home. I miss my friends. I miss our life. I miss my cousins. I miss my aunties, uncles. When are we going home?
Right.
And it was at that point, I think after 2, maybe 3 years in, they said we might not be going home immediately.
Okay.
The conflict here during those 90s, late 90s, had gotten pretty bad.
That was bad times. And Dad felt it wasn't safest for our family to be coming back during that time. Can I just ask you one thing right now? was that the primary reason for you guys moving, or was
No, the primary reason was Dad was doing his theology. So he already had a PhD in history, and he was a professor of history and archaeology at NU, Nagaland University. So he was just doing the further studies.
Okay.
And my younger brother had hurt his eye. So he actually poked a knife into his eye one day.
What?
And the best hospital, children's hospital, was in Melbourne.
Okay.
So there were a few places we were looking at going for Dad to study, for my brother to get surgery, all those factors.
Yeah.
So the reason that we went was literally to go for.
And that's hence the few years.
Yeah. He'll get his surgery, and then my dad will get his degree and graduate, and we'll come back. He was on sabbatical. So that few years turned into a much more extended time.
Yeah.
And still enjoying, still having fun. But I remember a couple of years later, I had to come to grips that we might never come home. And that was quite challenging.
Yeah.
Of course, I had still those very strong, vivid memories of being here, like the ones that I described.
Right.
So the first couple of years, it wasn't until I think I reached high school, right? So I went there in class 3. So it took a few years, but 4 or 6. So by the time I reached class 7, it was like, oh, I'm stuck here.
Right.
Like this might be my future life. And so that was a challenge to get through. So one thing I knew is that I was from Nagaland. I knew that I was a Naga. I knew that that was different from the place that I was, Australia, and I knew that there were no other Nagas. So in that sense, I knew that I was Naga, but I had no baseline. I didn't even know what a Naga was.
I get it.
I'd never seen a Naga in my life, since moving there.
Right.
So growing up, no role models or examples. So in those early years of high school, I made friends. One was a Chinese fellow called Wilson Chen. Another one was Armin Rashidi. He was Farsi. And we were kind of like a bit like anti-Australian. So they were both immigrants, first generation.
Okay.
And so we didn't want to assimilate into the Australian culture.
Right.
And we felt that our traditional culture was more valuable. Family focused, obedience, community, right? Whereas Western culture was individualistic, materialistic, and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So we didn't really want to integrate. So during that time, we were very good friends and everything like that. But something that I found was that kind of unrestfulness or unable to reconcile that, being a foreigner in a foreign land, not assimilating, but not knowing who you are as well, was not working.
Yeah.
So I remember talking to Uncle Rob, who's a very dear friend and mentor, and a very close friend of my dad as well. And we were having a conversation about this. And at that point, I said, Uncle Rob, I'm going to try and be Australian. I'm going to try and assimilate. So at that point, so my name is Kevisato. For a brief period of time, I started calling myself Kevin. To give like a white name, right?
Yeah.
And I even changed my accent slightly. And during that time, I also changed to a different high school.
Okay.
So all these changes were happening. And during that time, I really tried to embrace being an Aussie, being an Australian lifestyle. And even, like I said, the friends that I had in my earlier years, they were mostly first-year immigrants. And then when I went to this new high school, a lot of friends I made, it was mixed. But a lot of friends I made were also very, very much like 4th, 5th generation white Australian. And really tried to take on some of their cultural norms and the way they lived. By the time I got to that end of high school, early years, I really got a sense of belonging to Melbourne City. And to Australia to a larger extent, but definitely the city.
Melbourne,
definitely Melbourne City. And then that's when I started off on my first career. So I said, this is part of my community. This is where I belong. And so I had a desire to contribute. And so I joined a conservation organization called the Wilderness Society. So I think they must be still Australia's largest independent environmental organization. And I had a love for nature. And I thought this is the right place. So that was really where I started the first years of my career.
Were you done with college at this point? What
I was finishing. So I was doing business.
Okay.
I was doing music industry actually. I did a BA in music industry.
Okay.
And I was finishing that up.
Okay.
And I also did marketing. I also studied marketing. And so I was finishing that up, and I started there working kind of like part-time job.
When you were finishing up.
Yeah, finishing up. And then I joined in straight away.
So you were there for like what, 8 years? You said
8 years.
That's quite a big chunk of your life. I mean, 8 years is a lot. So I mean, of course, you're gonna share. I want you to share like what you did.
Yeah.
You said it is and it should probably still be one of the biggest independent wildlife organizations, conservation. So was that the sole reason that you felt like that you belonged and you felt like the place was yours, so you wanted to give back? Was that the sole reason you got into this field of like conservation? And
yeah, I think that was a big part of it. Like, so growing up, my parents are very much that way inclined. So dad has a very strong kind of like social justice, and mom as well background. My mom worked in social work. She worked in education here. My dad worked at NU, but while he was there, he worked in World Vision. He worked for the church. So they have they have NBCC.
Yeah.
So they had a peak church body for Australia. He worked there as well.
Okay.
So family background was very much,
so that drove it also.
That drove it as well. That's huge influence.
Okay.
But I think resolving my discontent about being in Australia and resolving some of that, my identity, where am I, helped move that away so that I could do that.
Right.
In terms of conservation, I think I wasn't really conservation or humanitarian or, whatever the issue was, I was too young to know. 18 or something, right? So too young to know anything about specifically industry or sector or place to go. I just know I wanted to do something.
Just help.
And when I found the Wilderness Society, many of the things that they said and many of the things that they believed resonated with me. Like the value of nature, having those strong memories of growing up close to a jungle, and then doing lots of camping, doing lots of road trips. I really felt that the nature had an intrinsic value. And one of why I stayed there so long, things kept happening, but one of the first times was I went to see what they call a clear fell. Clear fell. So logging there is not like here. So it's done on an industrial scale.
Massive
scale. So what we did was we went to this far eastern region. About 7 or 8 hours from Melbourne City, and we went into what they call a logging coupe. So an area that they're logging.
Right.
And we were driving up, and it was rainforest, cool temperate rainforest, and there were huge trees. Victoria is the state that I was in, is home to one of the tallest flowering trees in the world. Grows up to about 115 meters. So huge. So we're going through this rainforest area, looking at all the beautiful wildlife, the trees, like in a jungle type setting, right? Majestic. And we come into this area, and the entire area is devastated. So some of the practices is they get these big machineries like JCB type. They put like a chain in between and just drive through the forest. Right? So you have these trees that are, the stumps are bigger than this table. Right? And the area that we were looking at was quite a few hectares big. and hill after hill, it was completely charred black. So after they clear the area,
Right.
they burn the entire area.
Okay.
So it was like walking into a war zone. And as we were walking around, we were finding carcasses of dead animals. And that really, I don't know, that really, even when I think about it now, it really hurt me. So that's when I decided, I'll stay here and do what I can to make sure that this type of stuff doesn't happen.
So, so that set like an impression on you. Then it made you want to stay and do something more. Just a quick comparison, very big comparison, but long time back I had visited, in Tanki National Park, our reserve forest here in Parent District. So it's like a beautiful place, and as I was driving, when you said this, it was like exactly the same thing, but just on a very minor scale compared to what you were saying. But you're just driving through the jungle, and like suddenly you come into an opening, and it's just like football fields of just like trees have been cut. So it's quite shocking that, to see that is a different thing. Like it impacts you in a different way, like visualizing and seeing it like visually. But anyway, on your conservation topic and the career aspect of it. Share with us like what sort of things were you doing when you were there, and what was the organization focused on, like the different
So the organization is very heavily focused on conservation. So there are the areas like renewable energies and everything to do with that kind of side of it, but really concentrating on conservation of natural wilderness areas. So the types of activities that we're doing was very broad. So you'd have an area that needed to be protected, and you'd utilize a whole bunch of tactics and strategies to have that area protected. So for example, you'd raise awareness. So these, like I said, the area that we're visiting was 7 hours out of town. Now the 4 million people living in Melbourne City have no clue what's going on.
Exactly.
So publicizing that, so making that visible. Sometimes if some of there was also areas that were quite close to town that were also being clear-felled or logged, industrially logged, about an hour and a half. So we used to take people to that area and show them. Because once they see it, they have to do something about it, right? Once you raise it, it hits. So we used to take people out there, and they used to see what's happening. Other was about legal, so strengthening legal laws. So there are specific laws in Australia that's supposed to protect indigenous endangered species, flora and fauna. So making sure that those laws are strengthened, make sure that those laws are being implemented. Right. So checking up on that. Then we also had the fun stuff. We used to do direct action as well. So what we call non-violent direct action. So literally, going and protesting in the actual site itself, where it was happening, or in the town. So you see like protest, like shutting down the street, that kind of stuff. And then the media as well. Lobbying, so seeing politicians individually and talking to them, raising their awareness about
getting them on board.
So the tactics varied, but where the area that I was most effective in, or I believe I was most effective in, is we were doing community organizing. So really putting power to the people. And that's the area that I learned most from. So how do we, because in a democratic system, how do we get the people empowered, and how do we bolster their voice, right? And how do we use that to impact the laws? How do we use that to impact the activities that are happening? We also did kind of private campaigns on private companies. So, like name and shame, like, this company is doing something bad, or boycott. Boycott these certain products. So boycott products that are coming out of native forests.
Got it.
So in terms of that, I learned a lot about that area of lobbying, a lot of strategy, tactical to get a certain outcome.
Message and got it.
The other thing that I really learned was maybe about halfway through my period there, there was an area called the Kimberley. which is in northwest Australia. It's a tribal and indigenous area.
Okay.
And there were some tribal elders, Uncle Phil and Uncle Joe, and they were walking down in their tribal lands on a big road. It's called Manari Road. And on that road, there were some people doing some work using machinery, JCB and that type of machinery. And so he stopped them. And he said, "What are you doing?" And they said, "We're clearing the land to build a gas mine."
Okay.
Right? And he said, "Who did you get permission from?" And they said, "Oh, we got permission from the town council." And he said, "You can't get permission from the town council. This is my
Indigenous land.
my indigenous land. You need permission from us. We're the law bosses. We're the chiefs." So then they had to go back to town council, and they started escalating the issue. It turned out that project was going to be one of the largest industrial projects in Australian history.
Wow.
It was a multi-billion-dollar project with lots of oil and gas companies involved. And I went to visit that area after hearing that story.
Right.
And just meeting the indigenous people there, I felt some affinity to them, and also resonated with the values that I had. So, if I remember correctly, the state government had offered the indigenous tribe over $1 billion, right?
Okay.
In to
compensation,
and also to support their in education and over an extended period of time,
right there.
to acquire that land, right? And the law bosses or chiefs, what they call in their area, they said no, right? Because they believed in something else, right? And there was a young fellow called Albert Wingen, who's also from that region, and he said, "What is the point of having like a jet ski if you can't even go in your own waters? What's the point of having a mansion if you can't live in your own land, right? What is the point of having a fancy car if you can't drive in your own land?" So they wanted to take that whole area from their own. So that was one about their attachment to land,
Right.
and something that I resonated with a lot. And the other thing was that, again, nature has intrinsic value. These inappropriate extraction methods for resource are not good for the community, are not good for the planet as a whole,
Right.
and that their integrity was bigger than $1 billion. Right?
That's
That
amazing.
resonated.
That's amazing.
So that resonated with me really well. And so as I was going about this journey with the Wilderness Society, I met a lot of people who had a lot of integrity in the work that we're doing, and a lot of mentorship and a lot of support to say, you have a desire to do something, and we will, in the way that we can, support you to give you the tools and the resources to do that. So my manager and the director there was Amelia Young. And she spent a lot of time mentoring me and teaching me and just giving me the skills that I still use today to achieve those outcomes. So in that sense, it was well worth spending that
amount of time.
Yeah, there.
That's nice. I mean, that's that story about the indigenous people. I find this, recently I've been on this journey of like self-discovery. I mean, like, I live here in Nagaland itself. I've been like my whole life, but about our roots, our origins, and stuff. And one thing I noticed is that reading all these books and stuff is that indigenous people across the world are they share a lot of similar customs, traditions, practices, and stuff like that. But one thing that runs across the board is affinity to nature, and their love for it, their respect for it. I mean, I think that's pretty clear throughout, whether it's the Polynesian people, the Aborigines of Australia, all around Southeast Asia. So it's an interesting point, because somehow it just led to this conversation and with you as a guest, because previously Bano Harolu came on this podcast, and she's a big time conservationist also, and she's been working with the Amur Falcon and a lot of other things. So that's one thing. Second thing is the previous guest that we had on, Akre, who's a geologist. He was we discussed briefly about the environmental concerns about how when coal mining or oil extraction is not done properly, the aftermath of all these things.
Yeah.
And I feel Nagas in our past, our forefathers and our ancestors had this great amount of respect and love for nature. Right? It's very evident, and somehow we're losing touch with that. So just connecting all these things, and since you had a pretty big chunk of your time, and not to rush you or anything, but you've just been here 3 months, but I'm just wondering if you do have any plans of working in that line to any capacity, like in Nagaland, with conservation of whether it be wildlife or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I think that'll unfold over time. I'm very concentrated on Naga Ed at the moment.
No, definitely.
So that'll unfold at time. But one thing that I was really appreciating is a couple of weeks, and a few times I've been going back to Dzileke. So I think, and even I went to Mount Jaffa up that way. But because Dzileke is close to Konoma, and that's my ancestral village, so I visit there. So I've been there a few times, and when you're driving from Konoma to Dzileke and you look at the forest, you can really appreciate how ancient that forest is.
Yeah.
And the diversity within that forest. So I think that I haven't seen what the inappropriate activities in terms of logging or mining, like you mentioned, here. So I haven't exposed myself to that so much.
I think, like you said, if you do see some of the places, then it'll impact you in a different way and maybe make you want to take some time off from Naga Ed and get into that. But Konoma, your ancestral village, is known for its conservation stories. Like it was the first green village in Asia or in India or something like that. And then they one of the first villages to sort of enforce this ban on hunting, which is it was a bold move considering our practices and history.
One of the first ventures that I was doing was actually called Wonder Nagaland. So Wonder Nagaland was a tourism agency.
Okay.
And we were looking at promoting Nagaland as a destination to international tourists. Because it was right before COVID.
Oh, okay.
Right before COVID, actually.
Timing.
Timing was not too good. If I had some foresight. I think we launched 2 months before COVID.
Oh.
So we're building this up, but a lot of that work. So something that coming from Australia to coming here, and for our fellow Nagas who's lived abroad and worked abroad and grew up abroad, it's kind of like having a glimpse into the future. So if inappropriate development and natural resource extraction goes wild, this is what it'll end up like. If tourism goes the wrong way, this is what it'll end up like.
Right.
So in that kind of sense, what we were looking to achieve with Wonder Nagaland was to make that intrinsic value of our culture and our nature, and really be able to capitalize on that. So really mark that as a destination for international tourists, because that's what they're looking for. And so I think some of the the natural resource extraction or inappropriate activities, some of it might come from a survivalist mindset. So we need to survive. We have to remember that 80% of our population is on subsistence farming. And we have the highest unemployment rate in India. Highest youth unemployment rate in 21.4% or something, 21.7% at the moment. So some of these may stem from a survivalist mindset, right? So,
but I mean, some definitely. You can't fault all of them, but
So, if there is another avenue to have gainful employment, right? And if there is an avenue to have gainful employment, then people will be more naturally attracted to that. So we wanted the gainful employment to be directly linked with the conservation and preservation of nature and our culture.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Right.
So many communities in countries in Southeast Asia, tourism is up to a third I mean, unfortunately for Sri Lanka, it was too much. Right? But if you go to Thailand, if you go to Vietnam, these places, direct and indirect jobs make up to a third of
the economy.
Yeah, all employment. So employment and economy. So it can be done in that sense.
Okay.
So in terms of conservation, not directly, but we were saying if we can find value in nature,
right,
and we can demonstrate that value, and people get jobs from that, then they'll naturally want to protect it. So that's kind of the angle.
That's a nice way to go about it, I think.
Yeah.
But and I honestly feel, I've said this in the past, that tourism is something that it is like a gold mine that we're sitting on. But the way, like you said, we have to be careful about how we go about it also. And then in a sense, we have to sell yourselves also, but not sell out. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to so that fine line that you have to walk also. Moving on from that, after your 8-year stint with the conservation, you moved to the higher education sector, right? And that also was again in Australia, in Melbourne. That also,
that also. Okay. So that was at RMIT University.
Okay.
So it's one of Australia's largest universities. It had globally, it has almost coming up to 1 lakh students.
That's amazing.
I think there was about 5,000 to 6,000 academic staff. That includes part-time and sessional. And then professional staff came up to about 9,000 something by the time I left. So of course I went into higher education, but in between that time, so while I was in conservation and before I went to higher education, I was also coming back to Nagaland quite often.
There's holidays.
Holidays. So I used to come 1 month at a time, 2 months at a time. I don't think I spent more than 2 months, maximum 3 months here. I don't think I ever spent 3 months here, but maximum 1 or 2 months. So the first time I returned was in 2007. So I just graduated. I was 19. I think I was 19 at the time. And I came back, and that was the first time I'd been back for over 10 years. So I left when I was 8. I came back when I was 18, 19. Right. So the first time, and it was just the feeling of being home. It's, for me, I'd heard stories about Nagaland. My father is a patron, very passionate Naga, and he's a historian. So he used to tell me history about Nagas. So I used to, as a historian, I'd come home after school and we'd sit down and he'd tell us Naga history. He'd tell us tribal history, and he'd tell us all the things that were going on from the way that he saw the world. And so I wanted to see Nagaland. I was Naga. I'd heard these stories growing up. I have some very vivid images in my mind from my early childhood. So when I came, I was just the happiest person, and especially to see family again. I came out of the airport, and I'm a bit extra. So one of the first things I even like the Jews, they go to Jerusalem, they go and kiss the ground. It was like a pilgrimage for me. So I was just overfilled with joy. And introduced to family and the food, and went to Konama, stayed there. I did a hike in Zuku, Konama Zuku. We went to the back. We went all the way to Sanctuary Falls, camped there overnight. And it was just such an overwhelming sense. And I just thought it was, one of the most beautiful places in the world I've ever seen. And the people are warm. People are kind. They're so friendly. Everybody wants to help. Everybody wants you to come over.
Our Naga hospitality is definitely a thing.
And as a foreign return, I was treated extra special. So everywhere I went, somebody's like, "Hey, have a shawl, have a vest. Welcome, come in," like that. So that was my first time I came back. Then I made very close friends with my cousin brothers, and especially one of my close cousin brothers. Then I went back to Australia. I continued with the conservation work. I continued volunteering other places like IFC, Initiative Change, where Afanikatu is, Afanikatu Iralu. And then I came back again in 2007. Then I think I didn't come back again till 2011. At the time that I come back, in between that time, a cousin brother that was very close to me had passed away. And in the circumstances that he passed away, was really indicative of what was happening to the youth here. So he was quite, he was a younger fellow.
Okay.
He's 10 years my senior, but at the time,
Yeah.
very young fellow. And other cousin brothers had also passed away while we were in Australia. And so when they had passed away, I could remember them when they were young, when I was young, right? And I was in Australia for 10 years, and within that 10 years, people were passing away. And it made me very sad, but at the same time, I didn't have a personal relationship with them. So when I came back in 2007, I'd made a personal relationship with my cousin brother. And so in between that time that I was away and then I come back, he passed away. And I saw Nagaland in a very different light, right? I saw it through the eyes of grief. And so then when I came back a few years later, all the beauty, it was hard to see. And I was seeing like a broken place. I was seeing broken families. I was seeing a broken society.
Right.
I was seeing, people who had generational trauma, people, more mature people who was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder because of the violence that they'd lived through.
Right.
So that, again, was front of mind. So when I came back in 2011, that's a lot of what I saw. Also, I saw the beauty and I went on a hunting trip and all, but it was very mixed. So the emotions were extremely mixed, right? Then the following year I returned. And when I returned the following year, I came with more of a mission. So when I came back in 2009, I felt very lost here, and especially with the losses in the family. And I was a bit older. I was 3-4 years older, so not just fresh out of high school. So a bit more aware of things going on, and so I could see some of the brokenness and some of the things that weren't working here so well. And so I said, if I was to come back to, I remember telling myself very strongly, if I'm to come back to Nagaland, I have to come back with a mission, right? I have to come back doing something, or else this place will eat me up, and this place will eat me up. Just like it did my cousin brothers. Because I'm no stronger or weaker than they are, you know. So in 2012, I came back working with IOC, Initiative Change, which is the organization that my father and also Afanikatu and Auntie Christine and all work with. Right. And we came I was on the organizing team for a conference called the APY HOHO, Asia Pacific Youth HOHO. And we brought people from, I think, 22 different countries, mostly from Asia Pacific, but there was one fellow from Finland who came and joined as well. And we took them to Mezoma. We had a conference in Sechazubza, in the Bible seminary there. I think it was a 9-day, almost a week conference. And I met a lot of inspirational young Nagas there, some who I'm still in contact with. So over 10 years ago. And that being there and doing a youth conference, I think the theme of the conference was a generation with responsibility. So us as a young generation, how do we take responsibility? Right. And how do we help grow our society? And we had workshops, guest speakers from all over, some very renowned, and putting a lot. And I believe it was one of the first times we had so many people from different countries coming into Nagaland. So 22 different nations represented represented here in Nagaland and the conference in Sechazubza. So that gave me some level of resilience, and that gave me the strength to say that I can return to Nagaland with a mission, with something to do. Because if I just sit idle here, right, then what will become of me?
Right, definitely.
So then in 2012, I did that. So in 2016, Then a couple of years later, my dad returned. So he returned to set up Healing Garden, and he came here to retire. So he retired from his job in Australia, came back, and he started building our family home, and laying down all the groundwork, which has allowed me to return today. In that same year, so 2016, when my dad left Australia and he came back and said, I have to go back to our people. I have to fill out my mission. And you kids are grown up, you're all graduated, you're all working, doing whatever. So in that year is the year that I went to return to do my Master's of Entrepreneurship and Innovation.
Okay.
So in my mind, I said, okay, I want to return. I want to go back. I want to find out what is my contribution to my community. So the same question I was asking when I joined the Wilderness Society. Then I felt my community was Melbourne.
Right.
But I knew that my community is...
You are Naga.
Yeah, that's something undeniable. So at some point I came to that reconciliation internally and said, I'm a Naga, so that's my community. So then the natural question is, what is my contribution? And we were coming up with these job stats, highest unemployment rate, the lack of a private sector. And these are the questions that were going through my mind. And I had one of Dad's close friends and also somebody who I look up to highly, Nichite, the CEO of EA.
Yeah.
And when I was quite young, so early high school, he told me that what Nagas need is financial understanding. What Nagas need is to be fiscally self-sufficient. More than anything. That's what we need. And, alluding to the jobs issue in the private sector. So I thought, if that is what we need, what are the skills that I need? And at that point, I was adamant that, I wanted to do something different. I needed more skill sets. I needed to understand how the financial system worked.
Right.
I needed to know how industry worked. Also the understanding that entrepreneurship, startups is one of the only few things that generates jobs out of nothing.
Correct.
Right? If you want to generate jobs, you need to do it in startup, you need to do it in entrepreneurship. So that's actually when I enrolled in my Master's of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. And that was the same year I quit the Wilderness Society. So I went then to my manager. And I said, I remember I dragged her out of her office. I said, I need to have a private conversation with you. And I think I just said, I need to go home. And she said, is everything okay? I said, yeah, everything's fine. She goes, is your grandma okay? She thought I need to go on a flight and somebody was sick or something. And I said, no, I need to go home for the long term. And she goes, okay. And I said, look, I've enrolled in these studies and I'm preparing myself so that I have certain amount of skills and resources to go home with. And she said, oh, okay. Everything's okay for now. I said, everything's okay for now. So then it took me about 3 years to 2 years to finish my Master's.
Okay.
No, a year and a bit to finish my Master's. Very short. And then that's when after that I joined the higher education sector.
So that's when you joined RMIT.
Yeah. So I graduated and I still felt that I didn't have enough resources and knowledge and skills to come back.
Okay.
And one thing that I wanted to know was, how does a big organization work? So RMIT, I think annual revenue at that time was about 1.3 billion. At that time, including professional staff, academic staff, all the campuses, close to 10,000. And then coming up to 1 lakh students. So very big organization.
That's huge, yeah.
So I wanted to see an organization as a whole and how does it
operates.
How do it operate? Yeah. So when I worked there, I joined the innovation team coming from, innovation masters. Looked at the future of work. What is the future of degrees? What are the mega trends? And moved my way through the organization so that I could get a bird's eye view. And before I left, I got to 2 places. One, I was working in this area called the strategy office, and they looked at everything in the university. They were a specialized team, and they would look at what areas of the university they can uplift.
Upgrade. The
The other area was the Center of Academic Quality and Excellence. And as the center of academic quality and excellence in a university, you had to look at everything. So all the way starting from recruitment to the degrees, to what people are studying, to the alumni, were they getting good jobs? What is the quality of the university as a whole? So I think we looked at 22 areas, and each area would represent 3 or 4 departments. So finally got that bird's eye view.
Right.
And then I felt like I have some resources, I've had some knowledge, and the skills I need, skill sets. So that's when I met Shiroi. Again, I went back to Nitite, and I asked him. I said, "Look, I want to set up some companies. I want to do some work in Nagaland, and I need help. I don't know how to do this, right? I know how to work in a company in Australia. I know how to, entrepreneurship and innovation, and I know a lot of these things, but I don't know the context of Nagaland. I don't know how to operate here. I need help." So that's when he put me in touch with Shiroi. Shiroi was working there at the time as his right hand, and he said, "Shiroi will help you be able to guide you through." And that's when we came together. So we firstly did that Wonder Nagaland. It didn't work. Pandemic happened. It shut down. Shiroi went to Singapore to do her master's.
Okay.
And then at that time, we were looking at Nagaland, peak of the pandemic, and we were going, how do we contribute? I remember she looked at getting micro loans for women street vendors. We even contacted people here and said, can we help ship PPP equipment from Australia or Singapore to Nagaland? So what are the things we can do? So we were looking everywhere. And one of the things that came was we went to this online, what do you call not podcast, conference, online conference. It was by the Himalayan Mountain Initiative. And they surveyed people in the Northeast and in Nagaland. And they found that the number one concern was education. Well, it's a pandemic. People should be worried about health. Health was number 2 or 3. Education was number 1. So we thought, what is so wrong here that in a pandemic you're more worried about more worried about school than you are about your own health. So that's when we started investigating. We spoke to 21 different institutions. We surveyed 800 students, about 300 parents, and we found that the issues were bigger than the pandemic in terms of concerns about the education system. And then that's when we put together and said, okay. And I had, and by now I had some few years in the education sector. And I thought, okay, I've got some skills here, I've got some resources here, and this is where we can contribute.
So this was basically the origin story of Naga Ed. Because that's the big one that I wanted to talk to you about. I mean, it's a great initiative what you and Shiroi have started and going, like full speed. The way you keep hearing about what it's achieving, what it's doing with our education system in Nagaland. So first of all, congratulations for that.
Thank you.
So now we have the origin story of how Naga Ed started. Just for the people that don't know or might have not heard about Naga Ed, or maybe have heard about it but don't actually know what you're doing, you know what I'm saying? So if you can just sort of break down what is Naga Ed in broadly.
So Naga Ed is a digital education company. And so what we do is we introduce digital learning tools into schools to help improve the quality of education and to lead to better outcomes. So in that, what we found was that the biggest space where the biggest need was for Nagaland was inside teacher training. So if you look at education as a sort of like a supply chain, and you look at policy, then you look at department, then you look at institution, then you look at teacher, and you look at student, how it comes through, right?
Top down.
So if you look at that supply chain, teacher is where we thought we could have most leverage.
The most impact also.
Most impact. So for every teacher that you introduce and for every teacher that is uplifted in their professional development, for every teacher that has better outcomes, they might have an average of 50 students. So 50 students are better off. Then the next year they get another 50 students. Then the next year they get another 50 students.
The exponential growth.
Yeah, so if you continue to provide professional development and upskill and leverage digital tools, right, then you can really have a lot of impact. So basically what we do is we introduce digital tools, a learning management system. We introduce content. So we've partnered with Central Square Foundation, who's provided some 12,000 learning videos.
Amazing library of content.
Yeah, content. Specifically focused on math and science. We have templates, and then we help the teachers how to utilize and leverage these tools and create a blended lesson plan. So teachers spend a lot of their time sharing notes, giving notes, marking question answer papers, tests. A lot of this can be automated. So if we're automating these jobs, the teacher has more free time to individually spend with the student face to face where the learning and teaching happens. That's where it happens. It doesn't happen when the teacher is marking, grading and handing out notes. That is not where learning and teaching happens. Learning and teaching happens in the classroom, the interaction between student and teacher. So how do we maximize that time? For your podcast, you have tools, editing tools, recording tools that make the job easier.
Exactly.
Right? Some of it might be automated. In terms of accounting, you have Tally, you have QuickBooks. So all these sectors have tools to give them more time and more resources.
To make the jobs easier also.
Make the jobs easier. That isn't being maximized here.
In the education
sector. In the education sector, Okay. So that's where, so in a nutshell, that's where we come in.
So your focus would be teacher training and upskilling teachers, and that is like your main priority.
Main priority.
It's not the only thing you do, obviously, but
main priority. And then we also with the teachers we help them develop courseware. So we've got all those videos, we've got templates, all these resources. So how do we digitize that so that the students can benefit and access all of that? Then we also work with the schools on how to transition into utilizing digital tools, and how do you do a digital transformation. So for example, some of the barriers to digital transformation is not technology. I was reading the other day, because India is having an edtech boom. So I think there are almost 10,000 now edtech companies in India.
Wow.
Right? When we were looking at it a couple of years ago, that number was about 5,000.
Okay.
Right? There's been $300 billion rupees invested in edtech in India in the past 2 years. This is a booming sector.
So the boom is there. It's evident.
Boom is there, is evident. So where is the boom in Nagaland? Right? So the barriers aren't necessary technology. Right? Some of the barriers are the confidence of teachers. Right? So if we look at it, the teacher is in the center of the classroom, and they are the channel of knowledge. So if you have a question, you go to ma'am, sir, miss, right? When it comes to technology, some of that is flipped because the student becomes more knowledgeable. Now the teacher feels uneasy. Right?
Okay.
So there's an imbalance in the classroom there. So some of the barriers are like that. It's about confidence.
As simple as that.
It's simple as that. So we also work with the management of the school about how do we bring about the digital transformation, thinking about various factors. Right? Because if you just, you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry in growth with literally thousands of edtech companies entering the market. You should say, there's a boom everywhere in India, right? There should be a boom everywhere.
There should be,
But the barriers here, some of it is technology, some of it is infrastructure, a lot of it is the internet and device availability, but that is not the end of it. So there are other factors. So we address holistically, how do we bring digital education to the school? And a large part of that is the working with management, working with principals, owners, and a lot of it is to do working with the individual teachers. And then when it comes to a student, you give them a platform, an app, a device, I mean, they're off and running, right?
Yeah.
The students aren't the one holding us back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people, I mean, personally heard also a lot of people, heaping praise on NagaEd and what you guys have been doing. Education, I mean, I know what you guys are doing with NagaEd as like, as a company, but education, just generally speaking, I've said this in the past that like I have sort of an issue of how it's structured, not just in our state, but like in our country, basically. Especially in regards to sports and music. I don't even want to go there, but that's a whole nother thing. But in your short time or your experience of working in Nagaland so far, how is the education system in the sense of like the learning structure? Like how do you view it so far? Yeah. What's your opinion of it?
So I've been here for a very short time, so I'm not going to comment a lot. I'm still observing.
Just in your short
period. But I'll tell you because we've seen some of the outputs. And by that, I mean that our company is growing. So in the past couple of months, not even past couple of months, in the past month and a bit, we've looking at hiring 6 people, right? So 6 new positions. And we've already filled, I think, 3 or 4 of those.
Okay.
So yeah, on our plug on our website, if you're looking for a job,
sure, we'll put everything up. Yeah, for sure.
Come to our website, NagaEd.com. But we are also so we're seeing some of the outputs of our education system, results. We're also I worked with a department and working with some interns who had gone to work at the department, and so judging by the output, I could see that it was very challenging. So the people who are coming out of our education system, if I can be frank, are not work ready.
Yeah, not job ready.
Not job ready. The employability skills. And that's not me working as a teacher inside a school. That's not being a lecturer inside the university. So that's not me unpacking what's going on in there. That's me observing what is coming out of there. Because I hire these people. And so when they come out of the education system, from school and then to university and like coming to work in our office, like we really have to start from basic office skills, basic soft skills, also hard skills, technology skills to be functioning within a company.
Right. And just want to add here that these kind of skills that you're talking about, in a good educational setup, they should already be equipped.
They should be already equipped.
By the time they're done with school, right? That's what I mean. Okay. Anyway.
So, for example, like when I was leaving school, like after I did my master, I had all the skills go straight into a job. People weren't even like I remember in my degree, we had a subject called communication. How to communicate, interpersonal communication, email communication, written communication, and how to interact with people in the office and different cultures and everything like that. So, like even that was a very strong. So a lot of employability skills. So what we started looking for is we were looking for people who are skills ready, and we really wanted them to move into like a middle management role. So that's kind of what we were looking for, and it was very hard for us to find those because those people, all those good people, are already taken.
Are
looking outside or already taken up, whatever. So what we landed on was okay. Let's look at their qualification. Let's look at their undergrad. Let's look at their masters, obviously as a baseline. But what we really wanted to do was we changed our tactic completely, and we said, what is your characteristics? What are the values that you have? And what is the potential that you come with? So that's what we focused in on. So for example, like we might hire a salesperson and say, oh yeah, I worked in a company doing sales. But when you test their sales skill, it's not there. It's not there, right? It's not up to par. And so what we did was we looked at, we said, what are your characteristics, right? What is your character? What are your values? What are you coachable? Are you trainable? Are you open to new things? Yeah. Do you have resilience? Do you have grit? Do you have stick through? Then we brought those people in, and we have our own internal training modules. Okay. So they come in, and nice. For the first 2 weeks, a lot of what they're doing is professional development. So that's one thing for the roles that we were looking for. Some of the roles that we're looking for don't exist here.
As in? Like
so, for example, we're looking for learning designers or instructional designers.
Okay.
That's a specific role that designs courses for an online or blended
Got it.
mode. Because it's not here, we can't find those people. So again, we can't look for somebody who has experience in instructional design or learning design or has done a degree in instructional learning, because
it's not here.
It's not here.
It doesn't exist here.
It doesn't exist here. So that's another bucket of people where we take high school teachers or people who have a teaching background, they might be lecturers or whatever, who have an education background, and then we give them the skills internally. So they come in thinking they're going to be a high school teacher. And we said, there's no school. You're not going to be teaching, but we will train you to become an excellent instructional or learning designer. And we have our internal training course, which I think for learning designers goes on for 3 months.
So that's impressive how you guys are literally creating or filling up the demands that you need by internally doing it and structuring the company that way. How many what's your staff count?
So
the members
currently I think we have 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before I get into this, just quickly, because obviously education being a very important part of society and in Nagaland, I've noticed, in fact I saw somewhere, but I'm not sure what the context was, but there was a lot of collaboration done with the Department of School Education also. So if you can just highlight some of the things that were what kind of partnership are we talking here that you have with the government of Nagaland?
So with the Department of School Education, we signed a broad MOU, and that talks about the work that we can do in digital. So we know that there's a Nectar project. So it's a very well-funded project.
I covered that actually.
Oh, did you? Okay, fantastic. So it's a well-funded project. Right. So right now they're doing a lot of their research phase. So what we hope to engage with them is when they get more closer to implementation. So it's a 5-year project. So a lot of them, they're working really hard to understand the landscape of what's going on. And so a lot of the implementation hasn't happened yet. And will happen over the next 5 years. So
it's an ambitious project.
So what we've done so far is we've done some advice, some consulting. We did a bit of research. We did those surveys that we're talking about in partnership with them. And we've also spoken to the team. But I think as we move forward, we really look forward to working with them down to the implementation. So I think a lot of what's going on with that, from my understanding, is a lot of the strategizing and a lot of the tactics that are going to be utilized moving forward. And then the implementation is starting, I think, only this year.
I mean, for me, that's a very important project. That's one of a separate sort of episode that we do called Ask All Should Know, and where we highlight important projects and policies that are happening in the state. So the then principal director Shanavas I got in touch with him, and then we interviewed him for just topic specific, which was Nectar and the Lighthouse project and all that, right? So that is an ambitious project, and then it's that important because of the we all know the condition of what the government school sector is in, and we don't have to go deep into that, but it's something
and
that's needed.
once in a lifetime opportunity.
To
get that
kind
level,
of
funding, input, resource, top minds, working on something, and something that can be implemented that will impact a generation. So
you guys are on board that, in the sense you're coming in as consultants, or
so we've signed signed an MOU with them. We specifically want to focus in on the technology and the digitization. So that project is divided into a lot of parts, including physical infrastructure, including policy, including databases and information management. So there are a lot of broad aspects of it. So we're looking to work with them on that particular area, and when the time for that comes.
it's of that much importance, at least for me, I feel. So I would be looking forward to updates from you, because what I want to do is, it doesn't have to be post 5 years, maybe like in a year or so, how it's running. I just want to do a quick recap and, like follow up on like what's the progress of this, the Lighthouse and the Nectar project. Anyway, moving on from that, a big announcement that I remember reading, and it was all over social media and in the newspapers and all. It was the FDI, the foreign direct investment that NagaEd managed to secure.
Yeah.
Share with us about how that happened.
Yeah.
And also, just for the people that don't know, just generally break down FDI, what it is, and how you benefit from it, and how it works also.
So the Shiroi, my partner, is much more well versed to talk about this. Compliances and finance is really our forte. So I'll try and do it justice. I'll try and do it justice. So the FDI is foreign direct investment, which means that an outside entity, so outside of India, is directly investing in a company here. Right? When it comes to FDI, it's really important in helping stimulate an economy, right? So, for example, for India, or for at a time when we have developing economies, the economy itself doesn't have enough resources to create the companies, to create the jobs, to create the infrastructure that it needs. So it needs investment from outside.
Right.
So it is a critical part of any economy. Especially in a developing area, you can't generate your own resources because it's not there. That's why it's a developing area.
Right.
So it becomes the most important thing when it comes to a development setting, and which is what we have here in the Northeast in Nagaland. So in India, I think, so we got it last year. So in India, for that year, the FDI was close to $1 billion. Right? Inflows into India on all sorts of companies. Right?
All sectors,
All sectors, right? All together. So that's, somebody can translate that into rupees if they need to. But close to $1 billion, or just about $1 billion. Of that, none or zero came to Nagaland. And that's not just for that year, but historically. So you have huge amounts of resources from foreign countries that are coming to India, kind of investing all sorts of companies, technology or whatever it might be, and especially edtech, because that's a big boom sector at the moment. But less than 1% or less than 0.1% coming to the Northeast.
And then the bulk of that, I'm sure, is Assam.
Bulk of that would be Assam. And then none coming to Nagaland. So with that, we really wanted to demonstrate that Nagaland is investment ready, that Nagaland is a place that investors can look to, right? And I think that helps change the narrative around investing in Nagaland. Because when you Google Nagaland, you don't get the best news, right? If you're in Australia, you Google Nagaland, I'm sorry, but all you get is about violence, about conflict and everything. And in fact, if you're traveling to Nagaland, the government has a standard warning. Don't travel to Nagaland. That's Australia, and that's from a lot of countries, standard warning. Don't travel to Nagaland. So Nagaland is not in a very good state. So we wanted to help shift some of that narrative. The second thing is to introduce something to our own entrepreneurs. Right? So our own entrepreneurs are looking for resources, looking for funding, looking around. Here's a massive avenue, right? And it's not impossible. Now, there are a lot of compliances that come to it.
The technicalities.
The technicalities. Who is the what is the foreign entity? How much are you investing? What is the percentage? What is the valuation of the company? And even down to like what bank account is coming from. The RBI is checking all of that. So those compliances took over like 6 months or something. Just to
It'll
get
be a headache. For sure.
So people are sending that money, but before it arrives, huge amount of compliances.
Right.
So, in terms of a startup stage, what we call is pre-seed. So you have the pre-seed, seed, and maybe like round A, B. So this is the earliest round that we have. So that's where we started as a young company, and we were really.
This was last year, right?
Yeah, this was last year. So we were really fortunate to turn to investors both here, domestically,
Right.
and overseas, and in Australia and in Singapore, where Shiroi was, where people believed in
Naga
Ed, believed in the work that we're doing.
Right.
At that point, no proof in the pudding. There's nothing to prove. But really believe in the work, and the kind of investors were also social impact investors. So people not purely looking at a financial return. Of course, they want their
that
capital to grow, their investment to grow. But
There's
they
some
also,
other factors, right?
There's also another factor. They want to see their money doing good.
Yeah.
Right. And so in both cases, we're very happy to say that's what's being achieved. We're helping with the education system. We're growing as a company. And continue to grow this year. So the things that they're looking for. So I think that sent for what I wish is to send that kind of strong message to our local entrepreneurs to say, yeah, you have integrity, you're doing something good, right? You have a good, robust business model.
Yeah.
You have credibility behind you. If you reach out for help, I guarantee there are people willing to help you. Right. And there's not only the avenues locally here, not only the avenues in India, but there are avenues
overseas
around the world. So that was kind of our main mission in doing that. And so that's come through. It's really helped us set up the company. Like I said, doing our recruits, setting up our office, setting up some of the digital infrastructure that we need to really
achieve your targets. I mean, this FDI deal for me, when I first read about it, I was surprised. Not to say that Naga companies are not capable of getting FDI. That's not the part I was surprised about. It's like what I feel. I'm happy that you guys could achieve this is because the fact that you guys got FDI. Is one of those things I feel like, where someone needs to break the glass ceiling. And once that's done, then other people who could have done it before
look into it.
Yeah, but when they see a fellow Naga, company, a fellow Naga's company getting FDI, now they suddenly feel they can do it and they may achieve, go on to do it. But it's one of those situations where someone has to just do it first, and then it's like everyone believes or whatever the case may be. But so it's good that you guys did it, because there are a lot of other companies I see in Nagaland, startups or some establishments also, which I feel can definitely get FDI. So thank you for that. That's a good thing.
Lots of potential there. I think we called it breaking the tribal ceiling. Exactly what you were saying. There's a tribal ceiling for us,
right.
And we just have to push through it. I think the other analogy that I was using at the time was that as you're going through a forest, you're cutting through a forest with your dao, you need somebody to cut the road for, and then people can just...
So that they can see the path. Nice analogy. And I mean, you're very early on Naga Ed is still in its infancy, I would say, although of the many works that you're doing. Can you share some of your, whatever you can share, disclose with us, of your future plans of Naga Ed, and which direction do you want to head in the future? Do you have some short-term, long-term goals that you can share with us?
So I'll go with the short-term goals.
Okay.
So with the short-term goals, we're definitely looking at different sectors as well, because what we provide is a learning management system and training. So that's not limited to schools. Colleges, higher education also need that, and that's also my background. And I know how these tools can be utilized in that sector to really leverage that, to be able to really leverage that technology and maximize the education there. But again, there are a lot of training institutions. I know that hospitals do a lot of internal training. So how do you put your training modules onto a digital platform? Right. So anybody who's doing any sort of training or education can utilize digital platforms, digitize their content, and put their students or their trainees through. So this year we're going to start exploring a few other places.
Those kind of avenues.
The other thing is that we set ourselves out as a social impact enterprise. So we really want to hit that last mile communities. Shiroi and I both have an NGO background. So I worked in conservation. She worked at EA.
Yes.
But one of the struggles that we had was that in that NGO or charity kind of sector, it's always a funding issue.
Yep.
Whether you get a grant or whether you get some donations, it's not stable.
Yeah, it's dependent on those.
It's dependent on the agenda of something, something else. So we wanted to be independent of that. So we said, let's set up a private limited company. Let's have a great product that people want, that benefit people, and people are paying for. Right? What do we do with those profits? We can do the work that we want to do as well. We can go into rural and remote communities, and we can look at introducing digital technology to uplift the education in those areas. So this year we're going to the border of India and Myanmar. So we're going right to the border. We're going to Kipri.
Oh, Kipri. Okay.
So we're going right to the border, and we're going to do some recon. We're looking at 5 villages, and we're looking at how. Obviously, we don't have the solutions, but we know that. What can we do here? It can be, what does digital education look like here? How do people leverage it? So we'll go do that recon and we'll start that project.
Nice.
So in some of the short term is looking at different sectors, but also doing that impact work as well.
The social impact. That's
so
nice.
that's in the immediate. And then I think moving forward, the next few years is really earning our stripes in terms of our system. So when we go to schools, we do the training, we do the coaching, we introduce students, but we're not seeing the outcomes yet.
The track record that you want.
The track record. So the next couple of years is going to be very important for building that track record. Yes, people are doing our courses. Yes, people are being trained by us, and look at the improvement we have in the results.
So you want those results to show,
proof is in the pudding. Then in the long term, I think we discussed it the other day, is that what you were alluding to in the sports and the arts field as well, is that education as a whole, right here, and I'm saying this because I see the outputs, not because I'm in the school teaching, is not getting people ready for life and work, right?
100% agree.
So what we've divided ourselves into 3 pillars. The first one is what we're doing right now, earning our stripes in academic. Academic is very important.
Yeah, of course it is.
100% important. So how do we utilize our tools and our training systems to improve academic results? Numeracy, literacy, math, science. How do we get those improvements out? Secondly, it's as education institutions, how do we support them on getting students ready for the life of work? So there's a lot of where I did my research when I was at RMIT University. So what is the essential skills that students need to move them into the workplace? One of the fantastic things about Nagaland, and one of the fantastic things that we have here, is we have a great opportunity to leapfrog the Industrial Revolution. So we're in the 4th Industrial Revolution, we're in the cyber age. And we don't need to go through the 3rd Industrial Revolution. We don't need to go through the 1st Industrial Revolution to get to where we're going. We don't need the mass mechanization. We don't need the factories. Right? If we can specialize as in getting students ready for that world of work, which is largely hybrid, which is largely digital, right?
Correct.
Then we can have all the benefits of our natural world with all the benefits of modernity. Right. So one example I give is my neighbor. He works for a company, IT firm in Bangalore. He hasn't been to Bangalore in like 8 months. He's working remotely. So many people are working remotely. But what are those skills that they need for that future of
to
work?
get that?
Right. So how do we? So we want to have that
focus on that.
Focus in on that, getting those people
job ready.
Job ready, but not just job ready for the world of today. Job ready for, well, it is actually the world of today. That hybrid work. That so that's the other area. Then the last area, the last pillar. So essential skills, what we call lessons for living. So a large part of my journey is building character.
I like that.
So that's part of my personal journey, and it's kind of made me who I am today. And I think, people might say wrongly, differ, but I think I'm a fairly good citizen. I'm a decent person. That actually takes a lot of work, right? the amount of mentorship I've had,
Yeah.
the amount of conferences I've gone to, the amount of workshops I've done, the amount of people that have supported me,
Yeah.
right, is immense work to build a good person, to build a decent person. I know because people have invested in me, right? Now, in the yesteryear, a whole village would do that. It would be done in the Murung, and you'd have everybody around you helping you, make you a contributing member of your village,
society. Yeah.
of your member of your village, your family, of society. And some of that has been lost. There's a bit of an imbalance within our education system at the moment.
Right.
And so how do we bring back that balance? How do we bring some of that knowledge back? How do we bring some of those practices back? That is in the long term, right? How do we build character?
But I just to cut you off, sorry, but this I feel is very important. Character development and to a large extent, I would say like just the basics of like how the basics of like civic sense of littering or traffic rules. Like, these things needs to be instilled at the educational level. When you're growing up, you can't like these. I feel that is so important. Like you said, the perfect case was during our ancestors' days and our forefathers. It was passed down through the Morungs and all. Now with this Western education style or format or whatever that we've inherited and that we follow now, some of those, if not a lot of those, are missing, and some that have very high value, which one of them I feel is character development. Yeah.
And I'll put it to a challenge and say that that's what the world needs most today.
Yeah.
And I think we've discovered that during the pandemic. So during a pandemic, and especially what's going now, we are seeing recessions occurring.
Yeah.
A lot more scarcity. With the example of Sri Lanka again, also what's happening in the States, Australia. Like people are quite tense.
Yeah.
Right. And when people go through that period, individualism increases.
Yeah.
People become more self-centered. They become more selfish because the resources are scarce. Sorry, you want to maximize and utilize those resources for your own survival.
Think about yourself.
Whereas what I would say is that the indigenous mindset or the tribal mindset or the mindset of Naga culture, right, if we go from there, that Murung time, is completely counter to that.
100% agree.
In a time of scarcity, right? In a time that we're going through locally and globally, what we need is those values. Yeah. What is bigger than me? Yeah? And you might say bigger than me is my family, bigger than me is my village. And ultimately for us, it's our ancestral village.
Yeah.
Right? But that is what we need today. And reciprocity. We have a belief in reciprocity as a culture. The interdependence. We know that we're interwoven. And these are some of the values, and this is what we really need at this time.
Yeah.
So not only for our own community, but what can be our contribution to the wider community?
Right. Not just limited to your ancestral village or your tribe or
or even outside of Nagaland.
Yeah, exactly.
So there are people trying to resolve issues in different places.
Right.
And if we say, hey, look, you're going through a period of scarcity, we're going through quite a turbulent period, whether it's in the financial system, whether it's going through a war, it's going through depression, whatever, pandemic, what's happening at the moment. Let me put it to you that if you use indigenous practices and values, you will have a more cohesive society than resorting to individualism. So then we've been practicing this since time immemorial. So how can we share that?
Yeah.
So that's the third pillar.
And that's the long term.
Yeah, that's the long term.
But I mean, that's beautiful. And it makes for a perfect segue to go into our final, part of the conversation for today, which is now moving away from work and career. And it's about identity, about knowing yourself. And your case is one that it's very easy. People would forgive you also for like losing in touch with your moving at the age of what, 8? You
Eight,
said
yeah.
class 3, and spending your whole adult life there. That day when we had the discussion, you were telling me a little bit about like this sort of question that you're asking: who am I? What's my identity? You know, obviously that you're a Naga.
Yeah.
But what actually, right?
Yeah.
So share some thoughts on this. Like, how has this journey been, and when did it start? When did you start this questioning yourself? And I mean, not questioning yourself.
Yeah.
On that journey of discovering.
That started, I think, earlier we were saying that started when I probably going back when I discovered that we were going to stay in Australia for longer than a couple of years, right? I thought, my dad is coming here to do some studies. My brother's coming here to get a surgery. We'll be here for a year or two. We'll go home to Nagaland. So when I realized that I was
You're there for a long time.
there for a long time, then I started really wondering, what does that mean? How do I adapt? Because I said, okay, I'm a Naga. I can be here. I can, move about, but I don't really have to take on board this world that I am in Australia. So that's when the question of who I am started really bothering me. And so through that, I tried to assimilate into Australian culture. And to the point where I changed my name for a little bit.
Kevin.
I think my family would have just made so much fun of me. Who was this Kevin guy? And changed my accent slightly. Tried to be more Aussie. And somewhere along that line, I came to the acceptance that if there's anything that I can be, right, to make me who I am, that's being a Naga. Right? And I didn't have any rhyme or reason to it. It's not that, it's not through rationalization, and it's not to say that it's because of my conditioning, and it's not to say that it's purely choice, but it's a mixture of all these things.
Right.
So for a long time, I was kind of, what is my identity? Who am I? And searching everywhere. Then I came to realize I don't have to search anywhere. I am a Naga, and full stop, that is sufficient. Right? That is enough. That's in your blood, that's in your character, that's in who you are. From there, then the question became, what is a Naga? So I said, okay, fine, I'm Naga. I'm not going to escape that. I'm not going to run away from that. That's who I am. As an identity,
Right.
As a core identity, and also I have other identities. I'm a founder, I'm the entrepreneur, blah, blah, as a core identity. So what is that? Right? And so one of the things was looking at the Aboriginals, because they're also Indigenous. So I actually didn't have elders. I didn't have aunties, I didn't have uncles there. So I would try and conversate and talk to Aboriginal aunties, uncles, because there's an Indigenous, so there's so then that's some of the what it means to be Indigenous for me meant those things that we've been discussing, right? Putting a value on nature,
Right.
intrinsically, putting a value on your contribution to something that's larger than you. And in most Indigenous cultures, that's within the family or the village, ultimately. Having a connection to land, right? And it was kind of as simple as that. Those practicing those things,
those qualities, right,
is what makes you Indigenous.
Yeah.
So when you say Indigenous people resolve issues communally. So when I have a conflict, right, with you, I don't come to you as an individual, right? We get our clans involved, we get our families involved, and everybody gets involved in that, because there's an understanding that the relationship between you and me is not the relationship between you and me. Because I'm tied to you, you're woven into your family, and I'm woven into my family. So if there's a string between you and I, right, and you tug that, you're not tugging me.
It's the entire.
You're tugging the fabric. When it comes to Australia, because I grew up there, that's not necessarily the case. People just want to resolve between you. It's our business. Get out of here, right? That also comes down to just not you and me. That comes down to marriage, right? So here we say we're marrying into families, right? And to the most extent, over there, they're marriage into two individuals falling in love and all that kind of stuff, right? So these are the practices that we already know and we are practicing. So as I move forward in this journey, I find that it's not as elusive and it's not as far away as I think. Right? It is right here. What is elusive and what is far away is my own resistance. Right? So I don't want to practice these. Right? So when I wake up in the morning and when I do something, doing it just for me, doing it for my own self, right? That's not practicing my indigeneity. So it's not that far away.
Got it. I mean, like I said earlier, the one common theme you find amongst indigenous people around the world. A few things, like their love of nature and their respect of elders and the hospitality. They're all very warm people, and so they're all these things we can pick up on. And one thing that I wish that it's sad to see, but a lot of people in Nagaland, and like you were saying, what conference was that the responsibility of this generation. It boils down to that, like there you see a lot. Like I'm also on this recent discovery, so I don't want to point fingers to anyone or such, but I'm also on the journey of trying to discover like sort of like where I come from, what am I, that kind of thing. And I feel that there are all these very noble aspects and parts of our forefathers and their traditions and customs that we need to focus on and bring back. And like one thing is that giving back to society. And this one thing I want to talk to you about, because you were saying when you came back you wanted to do something for the people, right? You wanted to have an impact, and that's something that's larger than you. So that's one thing I really appreciate about what you're doing. And also it would be nice to see a lot more of our people, at least the young people who are sort of making their way into the world and in whatever career it may be, to sort of think of their goals can be your own personal goals, I get that, but to also think about giving back to community and the place we're from and our people. So just wanted to put that out.
I contributing to community, being part of that family or that village, a large part. And when in saying these things, I'm also at the same stage as you, where I'm discovering what these things are. Right. So it's very difficult for me to articulate that because I don't know yet. But one thing that I have come to know is that it is really about practice. So indigeneity is about practice, not about knowing. Right? So when we're saying, it's about contributing to community, it's not knowing that that's what indigenous. It's about doing it. It's about sitting in the front seat, and then bringing that in.
Walking the walk.
So definitely that's the in terms of contributing to the community and what you were saying to your I wish more young people would do this and get involved. One thing that has been a challenge for me since I arrived is talking to and hearing the pessimism about our society and about where we are. So obviously I'm a very optimistic guy. I come with a lot of optimism. That's my default. And you kind of need that. But when you talk to a lot of, sometimes even when you talk to elders, right? You talk to your seniors, and sometimes even when you talk to your own age group. When we're talking to the youth, something that I have struggled personally with is the kind of pessimism or the negative narrative around Nagaland and Naga society. And one of the things that I came to practice that has been really helpful, and it, again, like we said, it's practice, so it helps if you practice as well. So you do it with me. So if you close your eyes, right, and practice with me. Okay, if you close your eyes and you imagine those stories of negativity, right, and you wake up in the morning or you're talking to somebody and they're saying Naga society is broken, right? It's not fixable. The level of corruption, the system's out of control, right? When I see, and the future cannot be fixed, and when I see that and when I stand in that, the question is, what is my responsibility? If that is the world that I occupy and that's what I see, then what is my responsibility? But if I stand in that space and I say there's hope here, there's young people making a change, that change is possible, that we can be a contributing member to our global village, that we can uplift, that we can practice our indigeneity, that, you know, the corruption will subside within our own generation, right? Then what is my responsibility? What does my day look like? Now, in those two things, neither one of them is truer than the other. But what we believe or how we see the world affects how we act day to day. Right? How you plan your day, how you talk is impacted by which one you choose to see. One is no truer than the other. So that has helped me severely. So when I wake up, I say, okay, this is the world that we can see. And therefore my actions throughout the day are different. Because that's the world that I want to live in.
I mean, I think that's a perfect way to wrap up this episode on the note of positivity, because I keep harping on this positivity, and I feel we need a lot more of it in our community and in our society today. And the fact that you can't deny that there's a lot of pessimism, or we can't deny the ground realities of some very messed up situations that we have, but how do we go about it in a positive way? Just bringing the positive energy and just sharing it around. I think that's a perfect way. So to close off the podcast, you give a few messages. You can look into this camera. So friends and family, and just the Naga people in general. You can close
friends and family. This is a particular message to my friends in Australia. I miss you very much. I know that we haven't been talking often. I apologize for that. But you are in my thoughts. And I miss you dearly. And you know, I really hope to see you again soon. So that's a general message to my close and dear friends in Australia. You know who you are. And who else too? Oh, to the community.
And just the public in general.
So I think touching on that note of hope, I think I shared with you one practice of how I generate hope, and how I use that as fuel and engine to propel me forward. So my message, or mainly my challenge to the wider community and our youths, is how do you generate hope? What are the practices that you take? And how do you find that? It's probably my closing message.
Nice. Thank you so much for, this. I had this conversation was nice. We have to do it again. Even if it means off camera or whatever. But
100%.
Thank you once again.
Definitely continue the conversation. And I hope you edited it. That was a very long one.